Welcome to CINEPRO, where we bring your favorite movies back to life with quick recaps, hidden details, and everything you missed. In the first scene of our movie The Accident, we see a woman who gets into an accident and dies instantly. Afterward, the car catches fire, and during the accident, the watch she's wearing flies off her wrist and breaks. In the next scene, we see a man driving his car who suddenly stops because of traffic when the woman in front of him has a flat tire. When the man notices this, he drives his car around her and ends up hitting a pickup truck. As he tries to avoid that truck, he finds himself on the sidewalk and crashes into a shop sign. He gets out of the car to remove the sign from the windshield. While he's pulling it off, he tugs on a wire tied to the window, which shakes and breaks because it was set up by someone named Fatty. The glass falls on the man and kills him. People quickly call the police, who arrive to investigate while waiting for the ambulance. Among the crowd watching, Brian, the mastermind behind all this, is standing there to make sure everything is going as planned. We discover that what happened wasn't an accident at all, but rather a team had planned everything from the beginning, making it look like an accident. On the other side, the police help the woman whose car broke down and move her from the scene. Uncle, who was driving the pickup truck, also leaves after making sure everything went according to plan. He throws his cigarette on the ground and leaves. When the mastermind sees this, he picks it up so as not to leave any evidence at the crime scene. At that time, Fatty goes to the nearby garage and covers the surveillance cameras with balloons he brought. Then he goes to a specific car and finds an envelope with their payment from the client who hired them to do all this. In the next scene, we see Uncle and the woman who was driving the car, and we learn her name is Woman. They are in their hideout watching the news, and we find out that the man they killed was the leader of the Salis gang, and no one suspected the accident. But Woman is worried about the mistake Uncle made when he threw the cigarette in the street. When Fatty arrives, Uncle tells him he picked up the cigarette after throwing it. Brian is listening to all their conversation through microphones he placed in the hideout. When he joins them, he scolds Uncle for lying and tells him that he was the one who picked up the cigarette. After what happened, Brian is no longer sure if he can trust Uncle again. When Uncle goes outside to reflect, Brian tells him that mistakes like this put them at risk. Uncle comes back and tells them he will quit smoking because he doesn't want to lose his job. After the meeting, Brian takes 3 different means of transportation to get home, so if anyone is following him, they won't know his exact address. When he gets to his apartment, he checks that the leaf he placed in the door is still there, showing that no one entered while he was out. He puts his share of the money in the safe, plays music, and goes to sleep, imagining his wife, who died in the car accident, lying next to him. After a while, Fatty calls a man named Mr. Wang and gives him instructions for their next mission. He tells him to take a trash bag, put his things in it, and leave it in an old building. We later learn that Wang wants them to kill his father, an old man who uses a wheelchair. Brian then surveils the father and son for several days to learn their daily routine. The team studies the place carefully to come up with a plan to kill the man in a way that looks like an accident or a natural death. Eventually, they conclude that the best way is to use the electricity from the local tram line. Brian refuses to make it look like a car accident, and they finally decide to hang a wire from the tram cables to hit the target as he crosses the street. To gather the electricity and strike the target, they need to do this on a rainy day. To raise the wires onto the cables, the team pretends to fly a kite in the rain. They follow the weather forecast to know when it will rain. Finally, when the rain comes, everyone gets into position. Woman flies the kite, Uncle pretends to sell children's toys in the street with balloons, and Fatty rides a bike pretending to make a delivery. Unfortunately, it doesn't rain when Wang and the father cross the street, so they have to postpone the plan. On their way home, it starts raining as if the weather is mocking them. In the next few attempts, they can't carry out the mission because it doesn't rain at the right time. One night, as they wait to execute the operation, Woman and Fatty find him smoking despite his promise to quit. They argue with him, thinking that a few days ago he said he'd quit, but now he shows signs of Alzheimer's as he starts forgetting many things, including that he said that. Woman and Fatty consider canceling the mission because Uncle doesn't seem well, but just then it starts raining. Brian wants to take advantage of the opportunity, and after making sure Uncle is okay, tells them to start the mission. First, Woman flies the kite around the tram cable. Next, Uncle is supposed to release the balloons to cover the surveillance cameras, but he forgets. Brian tells Fatty that since it's dark and raining, he can take the risk. Fatty moves with his bike, passes by Wang and causes him to trip and fall, making him let go of the old man's wheelchair. The poor old man slides down until he reaches the tram tracks, gets electrocuted, and dies instantly. Afterward, Brian goes looking for Uncle. While walking quickly, he bumps into someone, starts running, and doesn't notice the bus coming at him. The bus driver swerves to avoid hitting Brian, and ends up hitting Fatty, then crashes into a car. Brian rushes to check on Fatty, who asks him if it was really an accident before dying. Brian quickly takes all of Fatty's things and runs before the police arrive. When Brian gets to his apartment, he finds the leaf he placed on the door has fallen, meaning someone entered the house. But the police have already arrived because a neighbor noticed someone entering and called them. When Brian enters, he finds the apartment a mess, and all the money stolen from the safe. But he is relieved that at least his wife's watch was left. Before the police leave, they tell him that other apartments in the building were also robbed, but Brian is still convinced that this wasn't a coincidence, and that there is someone is chasing the team. He begins to doubt everyone around him, and removes the SIM card from his phone so that O1 can locate him. When woman tried to call him, she couldn't reach him. He goes to another apartment he had rented it for emergencies like this, and when he turns on the TV he finds that in the news, the police said what happened was an accident, and the driver is still unconscious. The next day Brian looks at the streets from an abandoned building, and finds that Uncle Ness and the others have finished the mission, so he goes to the same place under the pretense of selling children's toys. Wang goes to the insurance company's office to meet Chan, and the two argue over a file. Wang leaves the office crying, and then Chan makes a very important phone call. After that, Brian goes to have lunch at a restaurant, and there he runs into woman by coincidence. As soon as she sees him, she goes to talk to him, and tells him she is worried, but Brian refuses to talk to her and leaves her. Brian then goes to Uncle, who has started treatment, and tells him that the plan is cancelled. The next morning, Brian takes him to one of his apartments, and there he finds Uncle taking his medicine twice. Uncle tells him he doesn't remember how long he has been in this condition and doesn't understand what's happening to him, but he remembers Brian and that his wife died in a car accident. Until that day, Brian believed his wife died in an accident meant for him, and Uncle was the only one who believed him. To keep Uncle busy, Brian tricks him, telling him there's a new mission to carry out, and instructs him to stay in the apartment and watch the street from the window until he gives him new instructions. Brian then follows Chan, suspects him when he sees him talking to someone on the phone saying the matter is finished, and when he returns home, Chan is living a normal life. Brian notices the apartment below is for rent, so the next day he changes his appearance, rents the apartment and hangs up many mirrors to see the door from all angles. He then breaks into Chan's apartment to search for evidence confirming his suspicions but finds nothing, so he plants microphones and hides them. He returns to his apartment, draws a floor plan of Chan's apartment on his ceiling and starts monitoring him, recording all his observations and everything he says. The only person he occasionally contacts is Uncle, who keeps calling him and reminding him he forgot to light the balloon. Every time Chan goes to work, Brian follows and spies on him at the office. One day, Wang visits him again, and talks to him while he is completely shut down, miserable and sad. After Chan refuses to give him the file, Wang goes to the garage and puts an envelope of money in a car. Brian is surprised to find balloons covering the surveillance cameras, so he decides to wait and see who comes for the envelope. He finds that woman is the one who comes for the money. After she gets in her car, Brian calls her and she tells him she is now responsible for picking up the money and that she and Fady agreed not to reveal this information to anyone on the team. Brian accuses her of having previously dated Fady and betraying him, and he tries to find out from her who was behind the bus accident. Woman tells him that only a paranoid person would think that way and that he believes what happened wasn't an accident. But Brian isn't convinced and decides to kill her. He presses the alarm, causing the piped faucet next to her to burst from water pressure and hit her in the head. After wiping his fingerprints from the buttons, he goes to make sure and keeps searching for any evidence to confirm his suspicions. One day, he overhears Chan talking about a client called the Big Man, saying he fell from a second-floor window. When he hears Chan talking to his girlfriend on the phone, Brian remembers his wife and starts thinking about her more. A few days later, Brian hears Chan telling his mother about Wang's strange case, and that he met him before he decided to commit suicide to give him his father's death certificate. But Wang was acting strangely and kept saying he was regretful. Someone saw him going up in the elevator, and then he jumped and killed himself. Now Chan feels guilty that he didn't help him more. After that, days pass without anything special happening, and over time, Brian gets used to Chan's daily routine. One day, Brian gets a call from Uncle asking him to save him. Brian rushes to him, but when he arrives, it's too late. Uncle is on the floor bleeding but still alive. The police are in the apartment investigating. At that moment, Brian remembers when Chan talked about the Big Man, who fell from the second floor and now is sure he is behind everything that happened. He returns to his apartment, starts ripping pages from his notebook, lays them out before him, writes notes on the wall and tries to find the missing link in his puzzle. A few days later, Chan knocks on Brian's door. When Brian sees him through the peephole, he decides to ignore him until he leaves. Then he focuses on the noise coming from above, getting so distracted he doesn't notice the landlord arriving to cancel the lease. Brian stops him at the last moment, promising to clean the scribbles off the wall to make him leave. He spies on the landlord as he goes down and finds Chan talking to him about something important. Brian then notices people looking at the building's windows and hears someone say there's another person, so he gets scared of being caught and leaves the apartment, bumping into Chan on the stairs. Chan apologizes for bumping into him and leaves. At that moment, Brian wants revenge, so he makes a plan to kill Chan by reflecting sunlight to blind a car driver and make him hit Chan. But before he can execute the plan, he gets a call from Uncle who says he jumped after taking a lot of pills. At that moment, the TV reports about a journalist interviewing the bus driver after he woke up and told everything that happened at the time of the accident, confirming it really was an accident, and that Uncle caused it after the toys he was selling fell and hit the bus, causing the accident. This means Chan had nothing to do with it, and Wang killed himself out of guilt. Brian finally realizes he was wrong. At that time, an eclipse happens and blocks the sunlight, so the car doesn't hit Chan, but when the eclipse ends, the sunlight reflects on the car again. Brian runs to stop it, and when Chan sees him, he recognizes him, but Brian can't reach the car. In the end, the car hits Chan's wife. In the next scene, we see Brian cleaning the apartment, erasing the scribbles he drew to leave the apartment. As he leaves, Chan meets him on the street, stabs him with a knife, and asks why he did all this. In the final scene, Brian dies looking out the window, thinking of his wife, and finally, he will see her again, and with that, the movie ends. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next